Welcome to Labster. Here, you will learn about the mechanisms that have led to the mind-blowing diversity of life on Earth. This simulation uses voiceovers. If you don't have audio, click the speaker symbol on the top right of your lab pad to switch the play mode. If you disable the sound effects, the lab pad will slide up whenever there are instructions to read. You can select what type of audio you prefer. Deselecting any of the options will mute that option. Click Continue to learn how to navigate through your mission. Using the lab pad is an important way to get the most out of this simulation. Is this the first time you've played a Labster simulation? Perfect, then let's get started with your first mission. We've just gotten word from a remote beach in Cambodia that a sea creature carcass has washed up on their shores. We need you to go collect a blood sample to analyze.
Hi, I'm Ponlu. I'm so happy you are here. This animal carcass floated into our harbor. We were wondering if it is one of the rare megamouth sharks that has floated up from the deep ocean. We need your help in figuring out what kind of animal it is.
Use the test tube in the icebox to collect a blood sample from the carcass. Click on the sea creature carcass to collect a blood sample. Put the test tube containing the blood sample back in the icebox. Awesome. Thanks for the call, Ponlu. It's time to go back to the lab. Using next-generation sequencing, we determined that this sea creature might be closely related to blue whales. Whales evolved from wolf-like creatures such as the Peckycetus. Let's go to the evolution simulator to see how they might have happened. It's time to play and fast forward through time. Enter the room and go to the evolution simulator. Click Create Ecosystem to set up the simulator. Great! We will simulate the evolution of Peckycetus on this virtual island. Click Start to release a male and a female on the island. Observe the frequency of Charles's allele in the population over time. The two individuals mate and their genes are randomly distributed among their offspring. Each square symbolizes an allele, meaning a different form of a gene. Note that half of the genes always originate from each parent. Observe the population growth on the floating screen. Prey is abundant on the island, so Peckycetus reproduces fast and individuals quickly inhabit the whole island. The genotypes of the population are shown below. Take a look at the alleles in the first generation of offspring, the F1 generation. What percentage of alleles are passed on from the original mother and father? You got it. The parents pass on a random mix of half of their genes, which results in a unique genotype of the offspring. If you look at a single allele, you can calculate its frequency in the population. For example, in the parental generation, the frequency of the yellow A1 allele would be 25%. This is because out of the 4 alleles for the A gene, only 1 allele is of the A1 variety. Let's have a look at the A1 allele after another generation of reproduction. Calculate the allele frequency of the A1 allele. Does the allele frequency of the whole population compared to the founder population change? You got it. The random distribution of the genes results in an even distribution over the whole population, and the allele frequencies stay the same. This phenomenon was also observed by the English mathematician Godfrey Hardy and German physician Wilhelm Weinberg. They stated the principle of equilibrium to describe the genetic makeup of a population. The theory, also known as the Hardy-Weinberg principle of equilibrium, states that a population's allele and genotype frequencies are inherently stable. Which of the following phenomena could disrupt this equilibrium? You got it. The Hardy-Weinberg principle of equilibrium is a theoretical model and very rarely applies to real populations. In the real world, there are always evolutionary forces disrupting the equilibrium. The Hardy-Weinberg principle gives scientists a mathematical baseline of a non-evolving population, to which they can compare evolving populations and thereby infer what evolutionary forces might be at play. Due to the small size of our Peckycetus population, it is very susceptible to genetic drift. Genetic drift happens when there is a loss of certain alleles due to chance. Let's see what happens after a couple of decades. Why does the population not continue to grow exponentially? Precisely, the natural habitat has only enough resources for a certain number of predators because their prey is limited. Let's have a look at the genotypes in the Peckycetus population now that a few decades have passed. Here are 5 random individuals and their genotypes. Which statement about the frequency of the yellow A1 allele is true? Yes, the allele frequency changed. It seems like the yellow A1 alleles vanished from the population. I have checked and can confirm this is true for the whole population in this simulation of evolution. Turns out the A gene, or locus in question here, is responsible for the shape of the inner ear. Individuals with the A1 allele had worse hearing than individuals with the other alleles for gene A. Not surprisingly, good hearing is important for successful hunting. Individuals that don't hear well have a much lower fitness. This means they will die younger and are thus unable to pass their genes on to the next generation. Which evolutionary force leads to these allele frequency changes? What a fit brain you have. Every organism produces more offspring than what would be needed to replace the previous generation. This leads to natural selection. The unfit individuals are less likely to pass on their genes. Selection is the key driver of evolution and results in a change of the population. The Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium is a theoretical model that does not apply to most natural populations. In relation to evolution, natural selection is the... You're right. Natural selection is one of the evolutionary mechanisms that leads to a population that is better adapted to its environment. Natural selection is a very simple process without a purpose. Which of the following sentences is true about evolution? Fantastic. Natural selection weeds out individuals that are unfit in a particular environment, but for evolution, good enough is good enough. No organism has to be perfect. For example, many taxa have changed little over great expanses of time. They are not marching up a ladder of progress. Rather, they are fit enough to survive and reproduce, and that is all that is necessary to ensure their existence. Other taxa may have changed and diversified a great deal, but that does not mean they became better, they simply changed. After all, Earth's conditions change, climate changes, rivers shift course, new competitors invade. Fitness is linked to the environment, not to progress. In fact, species that have changed the least have survived through the most environmental changes. Natural selection is a non-random force that can reduce diversity. Another evolutionary force that is more random but also creates diversity is mutations. Mutations are changes in DNA, analogous to changing a letter in a word. Mutations occur in all human cells on a regular basis. Severe mutations usually result in cellular death. If several mutations accumulate without killing the cell, they can lead to cancer. Mutations that occur in the germ cells of the parents, which are the egg or sperm cells, can be inherited by the offspring. Often these mutations lead to a developmental defect and the embryo dies. Let's have a look at a mutation that does not lead to the death of the embryo. Instead, a healthy Peckycetus male is born. Let's call him Charles, after Charles Darwin. Charles's mutation leads to abnormally high activity of an enzyme that is responsible for bone formation. The mutation results in heavier bones and Charles develops a bulky stature. Charles is slower than his siblings and not able to catch enough prey. But against all odds, he stays alive by patrolling the beaches and searching for carcasses of marine animals like the blue whale ponlu found in Cambodia. Ironic. His bulky stature turns out to be an advantage against rival males and he is able to dominate a rich shoreline and produce offspring. Click Restart to turn the wheel of time again and record the number of individuals that carry Charles's unique allele. Observe the population numbers. It looks like Charles's allele persists at a low frequency within the population. What property of the population has increased as a result of the viable mutation? Exactly. Charles's allele increases the genetic variation of the Peckycetus population. Even though dense bones and a bulky phenotype is a disadvantage in most of the environment, Charles's offspring are able to reproduce and the mutated allele persists in the population. After 100 years, Charles is long gone, but his mutated allele lives on in the gene pool of the population. The population has reached an equilibrium, and this could potentially continue for thousands of years. But changes are imminent. Let's say ocean currents around our island diverge and the climate changes. Rainfall decreases and the vegetation on the island changes accordingly. Click Restart to see the effect of the drought on the population numbers. Observe the population numbers after the change in climate. The Peckycetus population collapses during the first years of the drought because their food source diminishes. All the Peckycetus are forced to search for food along the shore. The competition intensifies and individuals start to hunt in the sea. The heavy bones derived from the allele introduced by Charles enables the Peckycetus to float low in the water and hunt like a crocodile. It looks like 100 years after the climate on the island changed, the entire population carries Charles's gene. What is this phenomenon called? Homo sapiens, you got it. This is adaptation, not speciation. For speciation to occur, two new populations must be formed from one original population, and they must evolve in such a way that it becomes impossible for individuals from the two new populations to interbreed. Speciation can be a result of the geographic separation of two populations, called allopatric speciation, or can occur within the same location, called sympatric speciation. In this case, the heavy bone phenotype is better adapted to a semi-aquatic lifestyle and the frequency of the gene within the population increases due to natural selection. Mutations such as Charles's heavy bones accumulate over time and lead to diversity within the population. Natural selection, on the other hand, weeds out unfavorable allele combinations and favors individuals who are better adapted. Here is another locus. There are 3 different alleles that influence the fur pattern of Peckycetus. Click Start to simulate the allele frequencies of the 3 different alleles for fur over time. It seems the different allele frequencies are constant over time. Let's see what happens if there is a natural disaster and the population suddenly decreases. Note which allele is most abundant, then click on the disaster button to simulate a natural disaster. Click disaster on the hollow table to observe the effect of a disaster on the population numbers and allele frequencies. Each disaster decreases the population size, which increases the likelihood of genetic drift. This phenomenon is called the bottleneck effect. If a large proportion of the population is suddenly wiped out, the genetic makeup of the survivors becomes the genetic makeup of the entire population. Click on the lab pad to choose whether you would like to continue simulating disasters. Would you like to continue simulating? Now that you have learned about the most important evolutionary mechanisms, let's have a look how mutations, genetic drift and natural selection resulted in the tiny Peckycetus evolving into the king of the seas. Species constantly adapt to their environment. The aquatic lifestyle selects for individuals that are fast swimmers. Genes that lead to muscular tails, and fin-like extremities, increase the individual's fitness in water. Thousands of generations and several beneficial mutations later, the Peckycetus phenotype has changed so much that we define it as a new species. The excellent hearing abilities of those prehistoric mammals enabled them to survive in the oceans and compete with sharks and other predators. Whales diversified and adapted to a wide range of ecological niches. The largest animal that ever lived on our planet, the blue whale, evolved from a tiny ungulate, or hoofed animal. In other words, Charles is the great-great-great-grandfather of the unlucky blue whale that was washed ashore in Cambodia. You have sure learned a lot about life on Earth today. Let's get back to Ponlu in Cambodia with our results.
Welcome back. Beach scavengers are having a feast on this carcass. That's impressive that it is a blue whale. But, so mind-blowing that it is more genetically similar to a wolf and even myself than a shark. I guess I got tricked by the analogous features between whales and sharks. What else can you tell me about evolution?
Click on a topic below if you want to discuss it in more detail. Click Finish the discussion and end the simulation to complete the simulation. Fossils provide solid evidence that organisms from the past are not the same as those found today. Scientists categorize and determine the age fossils from all over the world, to determine when the organisms lived relative to each other. The resulting fossil record tells the story of the past and shows evolution occurring over millions of years.
Oh, I see. But I know that there are many gaps in the fossil record.
The fact that some transitional fossils are not preserved does not disprove evolution. Evolutionary biologists do not expect that all transitional forms will be found, and realize that many species leave no fossils at all. Many organisms don't fossilize well, and the environmental conditions for forming good fossils are not that common.
I see. So, science actually predicts that for many evolutionary changes there will be gaps in the record.
Click on a topic below if you want to discuss it in more detail. Embryology, the study of the anatomical development of an organism to its adult form, also provides evidence of common ancestry between what are now widely divergent groups of organisms. Structures that are now absent in some groups often appear in their embryonic forms, though they disappear by the time the juvenile or adult form is reached. For example, all vertebrate embryos, including humans, exhibit structures similar to gill slits and tails in their early development.
Oh really? So I almost had gills and a tail when I was developing. Extraordinary.
Click on a topic below if you want to discuss it in more detail. Another type of evidence for evolution is the presence of structures in organisms that share the same basic form. For example, the bones in the appendages of a human, dog, bird, and whale all share the same overall construction, resulting from their origin in the appendages of a common ancestor. Over time, evolution changed the shapes and sizes of these bones in different species, but they have maintained the same overall layout. Scientists call these synonymous parts homologous structures.
Even though we are so different now, the layout of my bones is similar to theirs. This is intriguing indeed.
Click on a topic below if you want to discuss it in more detail. Other evidence of evolution is the convergence of form in organisms that share similar environments. For example, species of unrelated animals, such as the orca and great white shark, have been selected for streamlined shapes to swim fast. These similarities occur not because of common ancestry, but because of similar selection pressures.
I see. Well, this must be why I almost thought the whale was a huge shark.
Click on a topic below if you want to discuss it in more detail. Have a look at the abundance of endemic species, meaning species found nowhere else, in Australia. For example, the great diversification of marsupials in Australia and the absence of other mammals reflects Australia's geological history. Australia has long been isolated from other continents by vast expanses of water, which prevented species from migrating. Over time, these species diverged evolutionarily into new species that look very different from their ancestors on the mainland.
Huh. I heard there are even mammals that lay eggs, called monotremes. How peculiar.
Click on a topic below if you want to discuss it in more detail. Like anatomical structures, the structures of the molecules of life reflect descent with modification. Evidence of a common ancestor for all of life is reflected in the universality of DNA as the genetic material. The relatedness of groups of organisms is reflected in the similarity of their DNA sequences, exactly the pattern that would be expected from descent and diversification from a common ancestor.
This is really amazing. I always felt there was some connection between all living beings, but I could never think how to explain it.
Click on a topic below if you want to discuss it in more detail. Click Finish the discussion and end the simulation to complete the simulation. Aren't science and nature absolutely amazing? Call us again if you need help in the future. Let me ask you one last question. Do you feel like you gained relevant knowledge during this simulation? Thank you for your feedback. Your score has been saved together with your 100% progress. Congratulations, you have completed the simulation. We hope you enjoyed it and you feel wiser now.